to the National Congress of America, and she comes periodically to talk to us about things in Congress and other things that she is working on. And so, Marilyn, the floor is yours.
Well, good morning, Black Collective family. Nice to see you all today. I don't even know where to begin. My list is so long, so bear with me while I do a bit of a monologue. But here's what I want to cover today. I want to cover the debt ceiling drama, which is basically about saving the U.S. economy from ruin. I'm going to talk a bit about the recent Supreme Court ruling that is going to affect the case in Alabama and how that has ramifications around the country. I'll talk a bit about the fact that the former president has been indicted and will stand trial for basically mishandling classified information. I'll talk a bit about some of the bills I'm working on and then open up the floor to questions. I hope to do this in 30 minutes.
And we can take longer than 30 minutes if necessary. So
okay, thank you.
I'm not putting you on any time.
Okay, and every time I speak with folks and talk about things specifically, I always like to give context. And I come back to the fact that in 2008, we elected a black man to be president. And he won the popular vote, he won the electoral college, he won twice as that. And there's no disputing that he won those elections. But what also happened as a result of his election is that you had a group of people who lost their minds. And the Tea Party was formed. And that has morphed into what is now what I call the Freedom Caucus in Congress. And I serve with some of these people across the aisle. So last week, we had to basically have a big, unnecessary, prolonged debate about paying our bills. Like we do under every president, regardless of party, we come together, we raise a debt ceiling, we pay our bills, and we move on. But because Kevin McCarthy, who's the Speaker of the House, the Republican, had to pay ransom to some of his most extreme members in his caucus, they got really mad when we had a bipartisan bill and raise the debt ceiling. So last week we were supposed to do some votes on the floor, and they basically got held up because they were having a tantrum that we saved the economy. Now, the debt ceiling bill wasn't perfect. There were some things in it that we Democrats did not like, but the overall consequences of not paying our bills and sending our economy into crisis would have had far-reaching consequences to all of us. If you're a public employee who has a retirement plan, it would have changed your retirement. The Republicans wanted to gut Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, add a whole slew of means testing for people to get benefits. And so we did what we could to minimize it. And the extreme Republicans were so mad at the deal that President Biden was able to get through Congress that they are trying to punish their leader right now. So there's a bit of chaos, confusion, and dysfunction, as Hakeem Jeffries likes to say. But we paid our bills, we averted a crisis, and this will not come up again until 2025, after the elections. Item number 2. So there was a court ruling, and the Supreme Court surprised everyone. And they ruled that Allen versus Milligan, which was a case about Alabama, where 7 congressional districts were drawn that discriminated against black voters. In a 5-4 decision, the Supreme Court actually sided with us on this one, and they agreed. And here's why this is important. States across the country, Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, New York, they drew these congressional maps. And now, because they're being litigated, they have to be revisited. And there was a deliberate intention to suppress black votes, to reduce the number of black representatives in Congress, and to do everything possible with some of this crazy gerrymandering in majority Republican red states to basically silence us and keep us from being represented. This case is a really, really big deal. And I talked to my friend Nakima Williams in Georgia, and she said that there's a case pending in Georgia right now. And because of the Supreme Court decision, they're going to have to revisit it. So is it a big victory lap? In some ways, yes. There's so much more work we have to do with voting rights, but this is a really, really big step, and it may mean more black representation, fairer maps, and making sure that our voices aren't silent. Item number 3, Donald Trump, by a grand jury of regular citizens in Florida, they saw evidence and decided that he should be indicted and stand trial for the mishandling and classified documents. And I know that there are some people out there saying, well, why are they picking on him? This is politically motivated. And I come back to one important fact. This was not the White House. This was not the Department of Justice. This was not Congress. A jury of regular folks in Florida, in red state Florida, saw the evidence that was presented and decided that Donald Trump should be indicted and stand trial for the mishandling of classified documents. And if you read the contents of what he's being accused of, these are classified documents, national security, where weapons are, plans to keep us safe, a whole trove of issues that really compromise people serving in the military, our intelligence apparatus, and safety around the world and here at home. So this was extremely egregious what he's done. So this will go to trial. Now, coming to the legislation that I've been working on, I have established a bill with Cory Booker, and we're introducing, and we're going to want to create an Office of Small Farms at the USDA. And this is going to create an Office of Small Farms to ensure that small farms, especially minority-owned farms, have equitable access to funding, to professional technical needs, loans, and critical conservation programs. 90% of farms in Washington state are actually small family farms. And we know that historically, Black-owned farms have not been treated fairly. This is one way to remedy that, and we're going to try to get this into the Farm Bill. The other thing that I've been working on is the Gun Violence Prevention Research Act of 2023. And this is really going to allocate funding to the Centers for Disease Control to declare gun violence a public health emergency and go deep into data, do a lot of interviews, and gather information about how we can reduce gun violence. The other thing I've worked on is the American Aviators Act of 2023 with Dr. Kim Schreier. And we have a shortage of pilots right now in the United States. And we're trying to do everything we can to allow veterans and those who serve in the military to get fast-tracked into training programs that are thorough to see if they can become pilots, working with HBCUs to see if we can provide some sort of coursework that will help people become trained to become pilots, but really trying to diversify the ranks of people who serve in that profession and reaching out in ways that we have not before. I continue to work on quality of life issues for our military families, including military justice, increasing the housing allowance, addressing food insecurity, and doing everything we can to make sure that those who are wearing the uniform, many of whom belong in our community, are getting their basic needs met. And then finally, I'm submitting a request so that the Tacoma Police Department can get funding for alternative response strategies to improve public safety. So this is really to help hire folks who are not necessarily uniform officers, but crisis counselors, mental health professionals, so when they go on a call, we can have the opportunity to try and work with people so that it doesn't result in tragedies that we've seen too often. And then finally, reintroducing the Enhancing Oversight to End Discrimination in Policing Act with Senator Elizabeth Warren, just trying to expand the capacity to enforce a law that prohibits patterns or practices, misconduct by state and local law enforcement agencies. And then two more things, a Women and Minorities STEM Booster Act, increasing the participation of women and people of color and African Americans to make sure that we are getting a fair shot at science, technology, engineering, mathematics, education, and history. And then finally, the upcoming 1890s Land Grant Parity Act of 2023, which is going to create funding parity for 1890s land grant universities, and a lot of these are in fact HBCUs. So those are just some of the things I've been working on, but I want to get to what I call the good part of the discussion, where I open up the floor to questions. I am not a legal expert, so I can't give you every detail about what's happening with some of these things, but I will do my best to answer what I can, and let's just open up the floor now.
Want me to go now? Okay, Miss Regina.
Hello, Marilyn.
Hi, Regina.
Well presented. Who were the 5 Supreme Court justices who sided with us on the vote?
So I think Roberts was one of them. Here, let me look this up. So basically, I'm not going to say Democrats because it's nonpartisan, but the folks that we know we typically rely on, the women. And then Justice Roberts was actually the one who actually wrote the opinion and crossed the line. And so we basically, know that the ultra conservative, I think it was Kavanaugh.
It was Kavanaugh.
Yeah.
It was Kavanaugh.
Yeah, Kavanaugh, Roberts, and then the other three.
Join the 3 liberals. Right?
Excellent. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Thanks for your question, Regina. Mr. Grantley?
Hi, good morning, Congressperson Strickland. Thank you for doing a great job representing us well. I've got a question. I missed in elementary, but I've always wondered this. Why do we have a debt ceiling, and how is that different from the balanced budget amendment?
Thank you for that very good question, and this is going to be a bit technical. So typically when the question of the debt ceiling comes up, we just raise it, and it's a very cursory action, regardless of who is in power. And what the Republicans did this time, and this was part of the ransom that Kevin McCarthy had to pay to get the gavel, was that they combined budgeting with the debt ceiling. Those two should be two separate issues. But we knew that we weren't going to get out of it, and that's why there were these cuts that were made. But I have signed on as a lead sponsor of a resolution to eliminate the debt ceiling altogether. Paying our bills should not be a political legislative decision. It should be an administrative decision that happens within the bureaucracy of the people who are responsible for managing our budget and paying our bills. And one thing I want to point out here too is that there's a woman named Shalonda Young, and she came up through Congress, and she was instrumental and respected in getting us the deal that we got so that we could raise the debt ceiling. There's a profile of her in the New York Times, but it just talked about the quiet power and success of her at the table. So there was a Black woman at the center of these negotiations, well respected on both sides of the aisle. And really, it was a lot of her heavy lifting behind the scenes and hard bargaining that got us the debt ceiling to be raised with as minimal damage as we could do. Again, some things we don't like, but Shalonda Young deserves a lot of credit for the work that she did. So to answer your question, there shouldn't be a debt ceiling. We should abolish it. And we're trying to do that. It probably won't happen under this majority, but it should not be a legislative decision that we vote on. That should be something administrative that people who handle the budgeting should handle whenever it comes up. Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Grantley, for your question. Dr. John?
Good morning, Congresswoman. Thank you for
Good morning, Doctor.
Thank you, and thank you for everything you do. What are your thoughts on Gavin Newsom's idea about a constitutional amendment on gun control?
I think it is brilliant. And I sometimes say that it's a shame that Gavin Newsom got into a little drama in California, because I think he would be a very strong presidential candidate. But I just read that this morning, and what he is proposing is completely reasonable. It is something that is going to keep us more safe, and I agree with what he's saying. I do not know the chances of that happening, and I don't know the technical details. I imagine that a constitutional change will require 2/3 of the House, and we are so divided right now, that would be pretty difficult. But I love the fact that this is even a discussion that's happening right now. And I want to add something about the guns. The hostage taking that took last week, which basically had us voting only one day because the opposite side of the aisle could not get their act together, there was a proposal from one of their extremists to actually allow, have you ever seen those tripods that people use when they are shooting on ranges? Well, right now, those are outlawed, or you have to register them, like you register the gun. And one of the extremists wants to get rid of that requirement to register them. So there's a lot of conversation happening right now around guns and gun safety, but I completely agree with what Gavin Newsom is proposing. The reality of getting it passed, however, is going to be another challenge.
Thanks, Doc. Ms. Chanel?
Good morning, all. My question is, how does the small farm effort relate to the Pickford case, or the Pickford kind of organizing that's happening around there for Black farmers?
So is the Pickford case the one in reference to the violence that they experienced?
Yeah, and the kind of taking of farms back based on their debt and some agreements that were signed, I guess.
Right. So what we're trying to do with the Office of Small Farms is really make sure that minority and Black-owned farms get the resources they need to be successful. So it's not really related to the legal case of what is happening, but I do believe that the land grants bill that we are trying to introduce will have a nexus with that. And so the farms bill that we're introducing is not necessarily related to that particular case, but we're just trying to make sure that Black-owned farms get the assistance, get the funding, and get a fair opportunity to be competitive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Paul?
Yes, thank you, Sister Strickland. I'm trying to be quick here. Related to the farm, I know in Seattle, King County, there's a Black Farm collective that's on Yesler and some other ones. I'm wondering how could they get involved in that?
So, first of all, we have to get this into the upcoming farm bill, and that is going to be, we have a couple of bills that come around every few years, and the farm bill is a really, really big one for two reasons. Number one, a lot of the SNAP benefits and the funding come through that farm bill, and then number two, you have things like the bill that Cory Booker and I are trying to introduce to get it into the bill. So I think the question is can we get that into the bill, into the big omnibus, get that passed, and then reach out to some of the local farmers and see, what kind of funding they can get access, what type of technical assistance. But again, the definition of farm is pretty broad in scope for a very good reason. And so we want to make sure that whether they're urban farms or suburban farms or, rural farms, that they get access to those funds.
That's great. Thank you so much. So two more things. The other thing you talked about funding, I find it really odd that there's no pipeline for pilots, especially here in King County, because, the air traffic in King County is like one of the largest in the country, right? But I know two brothers that have flight schools that are connected with the Tuskegee Airmen. So again, how could they get funding from from you guys as far as getting their schools better?
So I would say that the conversation about lack of diversity within the pilot industry is something that's really come to a head in the last few years. And sadly, it's because there's a shortage, right? And so I just met with a pilots association in my Lacey office last week, and we had this very conversation. So any staff I have here on the call, let's make sure that you reach out to them and give us any resources.
Okay, great.
There is a young man from Tacoma who is graduating from the University of Washington, and he just happened to have a text conversation with my husband who said, I think I want to be a pilot. How do you think I can go about that? He said, well, my wife just had a conversation with the Pilot Association. So we were able to connect with him, and we've got him hooked up into a possible training opportunity. And so I think my message to you and to everyone on this call is, there are industries where we know we should have a place. These are lucrative, they are in high demand, and anyone who you think will help pull that pipeline, please let us know, because I think there's an interest there, and there's an opportunity for our community to really take advantage of these, well-paying jobs.
Excellent. The last one is STEM. I think it should be STEAM. I think art needs to be included in that. So science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And so, how can I get the art included?
Depending on where you are, some people do use the word STEAM. Congress is a very legacy organization, so we just use STEM because we talk about science and technology, and we have those specific committees. But I completely agree with you. Arts education, as you know, is essential to brain development. People who engage in the arts do better in school, and I do agree that there is a nexus between science and the arts.
Beautiful. Thank you.
I told people there's a reason we call it College of Arts and Sciences, right?
There you go. Thank you.
Dr. Scott.
Hey, Dr. Scott.
Thank you for your presence here. Thank you for the work you're doing and representing us. I wanted to focus on the issue here, STEM booster. I think that's what you called it. The legislation has been introduced. And do you have any prospects for when it will be passed? I mean, or I hate to say if, but and some of the things that it contains, I'll probably contact your office just to see what the details are. But maybe you could say a little bit more about its trajectory.
Yeah. So the trajectory of these bills that we introduced in this particular Congress, the 118, will probably have a roadblock, and this is because the Republicans have a narrow 4-vote majority, and they are intentionally getting rid of anything related to DEI. Any committee that has a subcommittee on DEI, they're getting rid of. I have been in hearings where I have to listen to people say the woke military. So what we tend to do is we introduce bills in this Congress knowing that they probably may not pass, and then we live to fight another day when we take the majority back. And so the contents of this, Dr. Scott, will really just be about, underrepresented people who need an opportunity to be part of STEM education, making sure that we are increasing the participation. That could be through scholarship funding. It could be through funding at universities to make sure that they're able to reach out to folks. But I don't have the exact details. Bills typically work in grants, and so there will be a grant program probably set up through one of the agencies, but I don't have all the details yet. But we will get this written. We will start to accumulate co-sponsors, and then we will be very realistic about it. Probably not passing in this Congress, given the makeup, and then living to fight another day. The one thing I will say though, Dr. Scott, is that a handful of our colleagues on the Republican side of the aisle have HBCUs in their districts. So there are these odd times we actually come together to support some of the things that they know they have to be responsible for. They're going to go home and catch hell for not supporting things. So we will do everything we can, and as always, trying to get things passed through the House, and then more importantly, getting them passed through the Senate so they get to the president's desk.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doc. Corbett.
Hey, Marilyn. It's
hey, Corbett.
Hey, how's it going?
Good.
So I have a question. I'm gonna try to fumble through it real quick. But last year I was creating some workforce development programs and was having conversations with DSHS and Employment Security Department. And typically we owe our Workforce and Opportunity Investment Act dollars don't impact people's food assistance. And any federal means tested kinds of programs like SNAP, food assistance, TANF, those kinds of things. But something that's in the Farm Bill for the state of Washington that that prevents the admin dollars that come off the top of that the governor has discretion over that the state of Washington is actually using for EXA, Economic Security for All, for innovative workforce development programs. Those dollars do count, and they actually impact people's food assistance as they're in a workplace, in a work program, in a training program. And so there's something within that farm bill that's tied to the SNAP food benefits for Washington State that is having some conflict in terms of helping people get access to better jobs. And as they're moving forward and getting a little support to get access to better jobs, it can impact their food assistance and decrease their household food assistance. And I don't think that it should work that way. Was just kind of wanted to flag it to follow up at another time. I'm not sure how that works, but
let me try to answer this. And again, not a huge expert in how the SNAP benefits work, but I know that when we passed the recent debt ceiling bill, we actually left in there a provision that gives states the discretion to determine whether there is means testing that required for SNAP benefits. So I don't know, Corbett, if you talked to anyone in the governor's office yet and say, is this something that has gubernatorial discretion or is it mandated by the Fed? So that's the first question I would ask. And if it's mandated by the Feds, hook up with one of my staffers on this call and let's see if there's something that we can do about the Farm Bill. There's something very similar with military families. So they get access to food stamps, but the basic allowance for housing counts against their income. And so we're trying to remove the basic allowance for housing in the calculation of whether or not people qualify for SNAP. And of course, the tragedy is no one in the military should qualify for SNAP. But it's kind of a similar situation where they're holding one benefit against you, and then it decreases your ability to get access to food.
And Corbett, not to go into the weeds, having had some association with and DSHS, there are opportunities for at the state level to ask for a waiver.
Yes.
And many states look at their situation in their state can make a case to have whatever the condition is, federal or state, waived. And so when you talk to Maryland staff, talk about issues of waivers, and we can talk more about how to contact DSHS and see what the federal requirements are, and if they prohibit what you think we should be able to do in the state of Washington, we can apply for a waiver.
Thank you for eloquently describing what I tried to describe last.
Thank you. Miss Linda Archibald.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I have pretty much a comment.
Okay.
One, and good morning.
Good morning, Linda.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm so happy always to see you. And my comment is, I'm taking the I. Whereas we, as the constituents of the state of Washington, are so proud of you for what you do and how you do it. I dig deeper and say that I'm grateful for the fact that you're not working just for us. What you are making a leap in the difference of what you're doing for the people of the country. Because it's about when you're all, and everybody knows, I'm not preaching, I'm just making a comment, that when you're elected, you're working for the people. You're not working for yourself. And that's what you represent. That means everything to me because I get frustrated when I really get kind of pissed off. When I look at media and I see what's really going on, it's about a point for the party. It's not about the party. It's not about the party. It's about the people. And if I had my way, I'd sweep the whole thing and pick who I want to go in there to do the job because everybody's not doing the job. And when you got those the crazy, I was going to apologize. No, I'm not going to apologize. Some of those personalities, they're crazy. They're in there for the wrong reason. They're in there to maintain the seat, to increase their income. But when they retire, they got good money, but they're cutting on everybody else that needs help. But I want you to know that I'm so proud of you. We're proud of you. And keep doing what you're doing because what you're doing is making a difference for the country, not just the state of Washington. Maryland, constituents that come out of representation that comes out of, not watched this for a long time, for the state of Washington, my feedback would be that we have always made a difference, going all the way back to Jackson. The state of Washington, we got you. I know, loud. I know. I love her. So I just want you to know, keep doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Linda, thank you very much for those very, very kind words, and I do appreciate it. And you are right. There are people I serve with who are crazy, and if you get pissed off, imagine how we must feel trying to do good work, trying to improve people's lives, and having people just basically show their behinds because they're not serious people.
Exactly. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lyle.
Thanks, Linda. Miss Ellaby.
Yes, good morning, Representative Strickland. Ella V. I serve as Vice Chancellor for Equity and Inclusion at the University of Washington, Tacoma. Before I make my comment, I need to clarify that what I'm going to say is not a political statement. It's a statement that looks out for the United States, all of us, people from diverse backgrounds that need communities that can assure us safety and belonging, as well as equitable opportunities and success. And this is me speaking, not to the university, because I have not discussed my statement with my chancellor. Right? So with all those boundaries, the state of Washington legislature, approved Bill 5227 that requires all institutions of higher education to engage all faculty, staff, and students in anti-racism and DEI professional development in order to reduce disparities in achievement. So my question is, sometimes the resistance that we are facing against DEI is quite huge nationally. And I sometimes wonder, because I give people the benefit of the doubt, that this is maybe people banking on their luxury of ignorance, because they really don't know.
You gotta get to the point now.
So my question is, what would it take for a similar bill to 5227 to become a national bill that requires all institutions of higher education everywhere to offer and engage in DEI professional development and also include all public servants?
I could give you an optimistic answer, and I can give you the raw truth. It will not pass the U.S. Senate. And absent leadership at the federal level, sometimes you got to take it local. And so it could be something that a city council passes, it could be something a state legislature passes, which is what happened in Washington State. But, I will just kind of give you a bit of a commentary on the whole DEI phenomenon. And I come back to, the election of the first Black president, a cadre of people losing their minds, saying they wanted to make him a one-term president. He won anyway, and now we have what is called, allegedly, the Freedom Caucus that I have to deal with. So I would say the chances of that happening state by state are far greater than it happening nationally because of the makeup of Congress. And again, we can pass something out of the House, but the Senate requires 60 votes, and we do not have a 60-vote majority in Congress, and I think it would be a really, really heavy lift for a lot of people. And also, too, you think about, I think what's happening right now with DEI is that there is a reevaluation of it. Not a reevaluation of whether it's justified, but a reevaluation of institutions that pretend they're interested in it. They hire a consultant, they check a box, and then they don't do a damn thing. And so as I look at DEI, for me, it's like, why do you want to pursue this? Is it part of your mission statement? Because it can't be a side hustle in an institution. And what data and results are you going to be able to put forth to say you've made changes? And, when I talk about with some of the people I know in, the workforce world, it's like, don't tell me how many people of color or Black folks work in your organization. Tell me who's on your board. Tell me who's in your executive suite. Tell me who's making decisions about purchasing and who's getting contracting. And so I think there's kind of I don't want to say reset, but a rethinking of DEI in organizations and asking people, are you for real or are you a pretender? And so nationally, I think it's going to be too hard, but I think state by state is where it can happen. And what's happening in Florida right now with their crazy governor, I mean, you have athletes now saying, I don't think I want to go to school there and make money for this university. You have faculty members saying, I'm not going to go teach at this university. And so there will be consequences for people like Rick DeSantis in their own states, but I think it is a state-by-state issue.
Thank you. Ms. Regina.
Marilyn, well said on the DEI front. I raised my hand about, could you share with the collective the chairmanship clout that our congressional delegation has in the transportation industry that has so many financial opportunities coming forth?
Absolutely. So if you look at the Washington State delegation, we have 10 members. And we are not that populous of a state, but I tell folks that we are small but mighty. And we have a lot of gavels in important committees that employ a lot of people and help contribute to economic security for a lot of people. So even though we're in the minority right now, when we get back in the majority, and we will, and Hakeem Jeffries becomes the Speaker of the House, Adam Smith will be chair again of the House Armed Services Committee. Rick Larson will be chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. I serve on both of those committees. In addition to that, Susan Del Benny serves on Ways and Means, which determines how money gets spent. Derek Kilmer is on Appropriations, which determines how money gets spent. Pramila Jayapal is chair of the Progressive Caucus. Kim Schreier does a lot of work in agriculture and farming. And so we have a delegation that really has a lot of power and influence, and that benefits the state of Washington. When Rick Larson was vying to be chair of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, he was competing against an African-American woman, and he won the chairmanship because I told him that he was not going to get support if he did not intentionally talk about contracting opportunities for minority vendors and how we're going to make those investments in communities that have been historically underinvested in. And so, to your point, Regina, we have a lot of clout, but we'll have even more when we take the House back and have the majority.
All right, well said. Jeez.
Thank you.
So maybe you can explain how DEI and the Supreme Court rolling back affirmative action is correlated.
Yeah, so, I'm a member of the Congressional Black Caucus, and I serve as the whip, and we are 58 strong now, largest we've ever been. And we have been bracing ourselves for a few of the Supreme Court decisions that are coming down. So we were expecting the worst with the Alabama case. It turned out a lot better than we expected, and then we're going to await the affirmative action case, which is coming down. And I just totally lost my train of thought. What was your question, sir?
How DEI and affirmative action correlate.
Yeah, so, it's really interesting because the whole conversation about affirmative action has turned into people weaponizing it and using Asian Americans as one of the ways to weaponize it. When in fact, a lot of Asian Americans benefit from affirmative action. And so, when the court determines that, I think the cases about reverse discrimination, people not getting college admissions, those types of things, I don't think it's necessarily going to stop college admissions from saying that they take race into consideration, because you could put different weight on different things. What is your personal essay? But I know that using just SAT scores alone is not what they do anymore. And even, using the term race-based admissions, there are many ways to make that work if a university and its regents are committed to doing that work. And I come back to, again, the reevaluation of DEI in America and what it means.
Thanks again.
Thank you.
Lyle, back to you.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. It's always a tour de force, and it's quite so often we think that the very brilliant people in America are people that somehow that we don't know because they wouldn't be hanging out with us. But you prove that wrong every time you come on this call. And so thank you for your brilliance. Thank you for never losing your value proposition and staying with us. Thank you, Congressperson Marilyn Strickland.
And then one thing I want to let you all know, and this is an open invitation. So every year the Congressional Black Caucus in September hosts annual legislative conference. And we have seminars, conferences, speakers, lots of parties, I will admit, and it culminates with the Phoenix Awards. And so save the date for the week of September 20th if you're interested in coming, and I'll come back pretty soon and give you details about it. But we have some folks who are corporate sponsors who want me to host a Washington State party. So that's going to be in motion right now. And I just want to make sure that, we as members of the collective get the full benefit of my presence in Washington, D.C. It's a lot of education. It's very exhausting. It's a lot of fun. But I'm really hoping that Washington State will be in the House representing so that my colleagues in Chicago, New York, and Atlanta don't say to me, are there Black people in Washington? Thank you all very much. I love you so much. I miss you. And thank you for always having my back.
Thank you very much.
Mayor, Marilyn, Lyle, can Lewis Cooper ask her the last question?
I'm okay with that.
Okay.
You sure?
I'm okay, Lewis.
Lewis, I would have to move to Idaho if I didn't let you ask.
Good morning, Congresswoman.
Hey, Lewis.
How you doing?
I'm good.
I wanted to ask you a question about one of our special folks on the Republican side from Florida, Byron Downs. What is the story?
Oh, my goodness. So I was trying to explain to some of my white colleagues that we kind of have a code. And whatever he was out there doing, however they were trying to position him, I don't go around publicly bad-mouthing Black people. I just don't do that because it's the code. We don't disrespect. But I think in Byron's case, they were so shook that the Democratic caucus, and mind you, we argue amongst ourselves and we can be divided as well, but we were unified behind Hakeem Jeffries. 212 solid votes every time his name was put forward. And they were so shaken by that they had to try to find somebody in their conference who was Black, so poor Byron just got put up there. And there have been times when you see Byron kind of creeping over to the Congressional Black Caucus part of the floor wanting to hang out. And we talked to him and we're cordial and he's a nice person, but I feel bad for him sometimes because I feel like they just used him. But I think a lot of it during the whole speaker gavel debate with Kevin McCarthy was that they were so shook that we were so unified behind Hakeem Jeffries that they had to scrape and try to find a Black person. One of the things that they said in one of the comments was, well, we've increased our Black membership by 300%. It's like, yeah, because you went from 1 to 4. And so I just think sometimes their desperation is on full display. And if you ever watch C-SPAN and you look at the entire U.S. House of Representatives,
yeah.
the contrast behind the two sides cannot be more stark. The Democrats represent America, and the other folks don't. And so I would just politely leave it at that. So that's what I know about Byron. He's a nice guy. He's sweet enough. I talk to him occasionally. People in the Florida delegation talk to him, but I feel like they just put him out there just to play him, and there was something really cruel about what they did.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next item on our agenda is Christina Blocker. Christina.